Hey everyone, today we've got something pretty unique. This is a 1989 Laforza. The backstory with these is pretty interesting and I'm going to do my best here. The Laforza is based on a vehicle that was originally sold in Europe in the mid-1980s as the Rayton Fissore Magnum. The Magnum was designed for military and police use, but shortly after it launched, versions were civilianized and marketed throughout Europe as a competitor to the Range Rover. Then in 1989, a group of enterprising Americans imported the Magnum to the United States, where they Americanized it to a degree and began marketing it as the Laforza. The Laforza would then go on to be sold in the US in some form between 1989 and 2003. Sales figures fall somewhere between 900 and 1,200 units sold in the US over that time. Throughout the run, they used Ford V8 engines for the most part. They used a GM V8 later on in the run, but it seems that later on, meaning that late 90s through early 2000s cars were more one-offs. This one's a 1989 model. Apparently it was sold new in Salt Lake City, spent some time in Oregon, came back to Salt Lake City, and then the current owner purchased it from someone here in Salt Lake City. We don't know exactly how many miles it has. The odometer reads 18,000, but clearly if you get up close with this thing, and it is a 30-year-old vehicle, we're guessing that the mileage is somewhere closer to 100,000, 150,000 or more. Anyway, and I'm really excited for this. Let's do a tour of this Laforza. So obviously this one has seen better days, but altogether this is a pretty sharp design. The Laforza was designed by Tom Tiarda, who's a relatively famous car designer. He's responsible for the De Tomaso Pantera, the Aston Martin Lagonda Coupe, and the Ford Fiesta, among other vehicles. Definitely has a Range Rover-esque profile. It's boxy, it's got blunt ends, tall greenhouse, pretty short front and rear overhangs. I imagine this thing would be pretty capable off-road, and it was designed for heavy-duty use, which would include going off-road. Solid axles front and rear. Really, really thick solid axles front and rear. Pretty good ground clearance. You can see everything's really well tucked in, so there aren't a lot of parts that hang down, and therefore not a lot that would be vulnerable off-road. Leaf springs in the rear. This is one of the more heavy-duty vehicles that I've gotten to look at underneath. These tires aren't factory. They're actually really big, and they make this thing sit up even higher than it normally would. You can see the Laforza badging on the hood there. It looks like the outer part of the hood is plastic, and then there's obviously metal underneath because you can see that has rusted. Really small mirrors, that's something I noticed right away. For as blocky of a vehicle as this is, those are really small mirrors. Wheels are interesting too. Clearly this thing has heavy-duty vehicle underpinnings, given that bolt pattern. 6 lugs, but the pattern is huge. These door handles, a lot of this vehicle uses parts from the Fiat family of brands, and these handles apparently come from the Lancia Delta. So this one uses a 5-liter V8 that was used in the Ford F-150. Later on, these used a 5-liter V8 from the Ford Mustang and then from the Ford Explorer. This one has a tow hitch, and it looks like, yeah, it even has a 7-pin connector. So I'm gonna try to open the hatch. This door handle doesn't work, so we're leaving the door cracked a little bit. So here's your button for the rear hatch, and then there we go. So the struts have seen better days, but there's you look at the rear cargo area. Yeah, it's about on par with an early Range Rover. Spare tire sits behind the seat there. There's your paint code 224-817 Azzurro Metallic. We think that's a Ferrari color. All right, so this was a high-end luxury SUV in 1989. Seats are really cushy, they're really broad, really wide. Leather is pretty thick. It's actually held up pretty well over the years. There's not even any cracking in the driver's seat here. Could use to be conditioned, I guess. This definitely uses real wood because you can see the veneer chipping off here. At the time, this color combination would have actually been pretty nice. So black interior with light colored wood on a light blue exterior. So the dash is kind of separated into 3 pieces. So you've got obviously the cockpit area here, then the center stack, and then the passenger side swoops away. So it's pretty much parallel right down the middle. You've actually got cup holders, although they're only about 1 inch deep, so I don't know how much good those would have done. And then a little storage area. I don't know, you could put coins there, I guess. Automatic transmission, assuming it's a Ford 4-speed. Aftermarket head unit, but you can see this thing has Blaupunkt audio. So it does have low range. That, I imagine, is activated right here. So you've got your automatic transmission shift lever, parking brake here, and then low range here. Window controls are on the console. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then this appears to just be a dead switch. There's a lock over the center console storage box here. Armrests are mounted to the seats. It's kind of nice. They don't really stay in place, but they can be folded down, folded up. Steering wheel's a Momo design. Here's your gauge cluster. So you've got fuel, battery voltage, speedometer, tachometer, oil, and temperature gauge. And then there's a bunch of lights across the top of the gauge cluster here. Might as well go ahead and turn this thing on. You can see it's the original key. It says Laforza on it, and yeah, interesting cutting of the key there. So this key lets you in, and then this key starts the vehicle. And this one doesn't have any Laforza markings on it. Listen to that Ford V8 come to life. Overhead, you've got a sunroof, and on the console, some lights, sunroof button. Here's a little clock. Along here, fog lights, rear defrost, hazards, rear wiper. I'm assuming that's 4-wheel drive, trunk release, and then door locks. Not sure what that one does. Fan, HVAC, vents, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there are actually little vents right here as well. And I noticed one down here also. So a lot of air vents. Stereo, here is the factory owner's manual. It's held up surprisingly well over 31 years. So getting to know your Laforza, servicing your Laforza, cleaning your Laforza. On these low production vehicles, I can't imagine how much time goes into putting these owner's manuals together compared to how many of these vehicles actually sell. So here's that dashboard control panel. So we can see number 7, not used, so that's just a blank switch. Number 5 is the drive range selector button. To engage and disengage 4-wheel drive, press the button. Lots of cool imagery in this. Driving down a windy mountain road. Minimum 87 octane rating. So that's nice, given that this thing uses a Ford powertrain. You don't have to put premium in it. Here's a little more on 4-wheel drive. So use 4-wheel drive when driving on ice, snow, mud, or sand, or whenever normal 2-wheel drive traction is not sufficient. Your Laforza has shift on the fly 4-wheel drive. You may shift into or out of 4-wheel drive at speeds up to 40 miles per hour. So this goes into your drive range selector button. To shift into or out of 4-wheel drive, press the drive range selector button located on the dashboard control panel. When the transfer case is in 4-wheel drive, the indicator light in the instrument cluster illuminates. And then this touches on your transfer case shift lever, which looks like we were right. That's this guy right here. If you need more traction when driving off-road than 4-wheel drive can provide, shift the transfer case into low range. The transfer case lever, A, is located to the right of the center console. To shift the transfer case from high to low range, engage 4-wheel drive by pressing the drive range selector button located on the dashboard. Coast your Laforza to approximately 2 or 3 miles per hour and shift the gear shift selector lever to neutral while still moving. Pull the transfer case shift lever up. The transfer case is now in low range. Reverse these steps to shift the transfer case back into high range. And then this goes on to talk about towing, chains, trailer brakes, trailer loads. Your Laforza has an 8,000 pound towing capacity. Yeah, there's a lot of really cool illustrations in this. Looks like they were all hand drawn. Another one with the hood up. There's one from the rear. Very cool. Let's hop in the back seat. Okay, a lot of legroom back here. So, plenty of legroom. It's a flat floor too, which is really nice. So you can actually sprawl out. 2 air vents in the rear. I'm not sure what went right there. I'm guessing an ashtray, given that this is an Italian car made in the late 1980s. Not a whole lot else. You've got Laforza L's embossed into all 5 headrests. Some lights up top there. Grab handles. Let's another look at the sunroof. Really tall greenhouse, like really tall greenhouse. Visibility would have been excellent out of this vehicle. The windows aren't tinted either, so a lot of light comes through. It's a really open and airy cabin. Door handles are down here, and they're these little paddles. You pull them that way to open. The wood in the back doors is actually in pretty good shape. This sits very high off the ground. Well, the seatbelt doesn't seem to work. Okay, well, I guess we'll stick to side streets. Okay, seems to be working. Yep, feels like an old Ford V8. Definitely some rattles. One thing that stands out right now is just how open this greenhouse is. I know I commented on it before, but there is so much light coming into the vehicle right now. It's kind of nice. And visibility is exceptional. Turn signal didn't want to come off after I completed the turn. Italian cars. So I've now seen 2 of these. This is the first one I ever saw, and then I saw another one actually here in Salt Lake. It was a 1998 model. It was pretty different than this one. Later on in the run of the Laforza, the company that was selling them started to customize them a little bit. So the newer one that I saw had like quad exhaust tips. I think it had the Mustang V8. The windows were tinted. It had Ferrari logos all over it. Pretty tough suspension on this. It had Ferrari logos all over it, and that's kind of another thing with these, since they're technically made by Fiat, which owns Ferrari. Both are Italian companies. People will often mistakenly label these the Ferrari SUV, and they're nowhere close to that. But it has led to people putting aftermarket Ferrari badges on their Laforzas. So oftentimes you'll come across one that has maybe a Ferrari crest on the door or a Ferrari prancing horse badge on the tailgate. It's kind of a Laforza thing, I guess. So while the interiors in these tend to have degraded over the years, it is nice that they use a Ford powertrain because they're easy to find parts for, pretty reliable. Power is okay. I mean, it's a 30-year-old powertrain, but still, Ford V8s tend to be fairly bulletproof. So the owner told me that this thing actually has a pretty tight turning radius. Let's test it out. Oh, wow. Wow. It's kind of bizarre, actually. So I'm just on this little 2-lane neighborhood road here. Let's see. Almost made it, not quite. Still though, it was a way tighter turning radius than I expected. These side view mirrors are ridiculously small. You can barely make out what you're looking at from them. They could used to be about 3 times bigger. So not a lot of power, but it sounds good when you put the pedal down. All the stalks are really thin, and that's a hallmark of old Italian cars. Let's give another U-turn a try here. It's probably the most impressive thing about this vehicle, the turning radius. It's really tight. Visualizing the wheels underneath the vehicle being almost perpendicular with the vehicle. It's how far they turn to one way. And the steering wheel just keeps turning. It turns long past the point where you expected it would have come to a full lock. I don't know what the hissing noise was. Anyway, that is a look at this 1989 Laforza. This is one of the vehicles that has fascinated me more than any other. I view this thing as a Range Rover competitor, Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon competitor. The G-Wagon comparisons obviously come into play when you consider that this was designed first and foremost as a military and police vehicle back when it was marketed as the Rayton Fissore Magnum. And then the Range Rover comparisons come into play when you think of this as more of a civilian vehicle. Look at the side profile, look at the way they tried to make it luxurious. Obviously, they had the Range Rover in their sights in doing all of those things. As far as today goes, I have seen 2 of these things on the road. Given that they're a 30-year-old Italian vehicle at this point, most of them have fallen apart by now. This one has held up fairly well. I drove it a couple miles and I made it back. Nothing fell off, nothing broke. It could use a little love here and there, but it's a 30-year-old Italian vehicle, so that can be said for most old Italian cars. All right, I'm standing here with Benj, the owner of this Laforza, and I have 3 questions for you. First, why did you buy this thing?
I bought this because it was the first car that I've ever seen that I didn't know what it was when I saw it. And I knew that if that was the case, I had to buy it.
Yeah.
And I bought it because I wanted to say that I had owned one. It's super weird, super rare. I've only seen this one. The person who owned it was leaving the state and had to sell it, so
nice.
Swooped in.
You swooped in. Nice. Okay, second question. Have you had to source any parts for it?
I tried. There were a few. I was looking for some replacement fuses. I found some on eBay. They're very expensive. I was looking for new exterior door handles, which are shared with the Lancia Delta. Oh yeah, I was looking for a head unit. Can't find one of those.
That'd be tricky.
There was a Laforza forum on Facebook that says that they have door handles, but I never heard back from them. The only thing that I've replaced on this is a new battery.
Okay, nice. I mean, it's probably been pretty easy on your wallet then.
Yeah, it has been.
Good. Okay, my last question is, what kind of questions do you get about it?
Mostly, what is that?
Yeah.
I pull up to an auto parts store and people have no idea what it was. I drive around a car show and I just hear people talking about it, guessing what it is.
Yeah.
There have been a few people who know what it is, but that has only happened maybe 2 or 3 times.
As soon as you walked inside before, a couple walked by and I was answering questions about it.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
Nice. Well, thanks for letting me check it out. This is kind of funny. This brings me full circle. This exact one kind of started my car obsession with all of the weird cars out here in the Mountain West, and it's fun. It's fun that I got to drive it almost 5 years later.
Yeah.
Now. So cool. Well, I think that wraps up our look at this 1989 Laforza here. Thanks for letting me check it out, Ben.
Absolutely.
And thank you for watching.